Good morning, gentlefolks. Whether you're on LinkedIn or WYFIT, as I like to refer to it as, yeah? WYFIT is WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right? Now, on today's episode, SUP with B.R.O, yeah? Slightly Unprofessional Presentation with Bossman Rambling On, and that's the meaning of SUP with B.R.O, right? So, Slightly Unprofessional Presentation with Bossman Rambling On, yes. So, anyhow, today's episode, it's twofold, right? We're going to be talking about the light and the dark. We're going to be talking about imagination and reality. And more correctly, there is a philosopher, possibly a Greek philosopher. Please don't quote me on it just yet. But if you are familiar with this, let me know. Right? We suffer more from imagination than in reality. So I'll say that again. We suffer more from imagination than in reality. Yeah? So the question is, why am I bringing that up? Because there is a light and a dark side of the force. So yes, ladies and gents, there is a light and a dark side to content creation. A Jedi and a Sith of content creation for us who are CCOs. And a CCO stands for a content creator opportunist, right? Just in case you didn't know, right? So the meaning of CCO is content creator opportunist. Anyway, there is the light and there is the dark. And a lot of the narrative, or I guess the prevailing argument regarding being a content creator, presenting your social media presence on all of these platforms. Everybody sells you on the idea of how easy it is. It's easy money. How they sell you on this idea that all you need to do is post this amount of times a day, do this, do that, do this, do that. They give you all of the do's, right? So they tell you about all of this. They tell you about all of the light of the content creation side of life, right? They tell you the light side of the force. Yeah? All of the positives. The positives is that, you make all of this money, and you build this community, and you go viral, and you really start making changes, big changes with your life, and you can buy houses, you can pay your team and pay your staff and literally change lives around you, and all of that is true. No lies were told. No lies were told. That is the truth of being a content creator. However, but as you would imagine, not enough conversation happens about this. There is the light side of it, but there's a dark side. You ever hear them say, your greatest enemy is your undisciplined mind? Or your greatest enemy is your negative thoughts? Going back to what I said in the very beginning of this episode of SUP with B.R.O, where I said we suffer more from imagination than in reality. So this episode, maybe you can say it with me, but in life you have to take the bitter with the sweet. So for example, you hear all of that crap outside. I have to either endure that or ignore that to make this video. So why did I get rid of the Jedi? I'm going to tell you why. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be Emperor Palpatine. Right? Not trying to be Emperor Palpatine. But why did I get rid of the Jedi? I'll put it back. And I'll explain why we're going to talk about this. Because, bear with me and watch this. See, on the light side, of the force as it pertains to the content creation aspect of life. I'll present it to you. So, on the plus side, we'll have this. One, you feel very much accomplished. You also have an excellent sense of fulfillment. You have visible results. And of course, all of which contributes to your great sense of purpose. The noise here in the background, that is the Sith, right? Me trying to do this video is the Jedi, outside is the Sith. In here is the butterfly, out there is the moth. In here is the Jedi, out there is the Sith. You see? That's why perspective is everything. Shout out to Bossman Teaching, since we all know Pi. P-I-E, perspective is everything. Anyway, back to this. So now that we know about this, why don't we start adjusting the Sith? Some people would call it the elephant in the room, but you know, in any case, what about the dark? What would be the consequences, or maybe the pros and the cons? Ah, look at that. What's that? No, the dark side of content creation is that every day you are at war with your own imagination. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. Watch this. Watch this. Now, this is what it means. Yeah? When you're at war with your imagination versus understanding your reality. This is where you are. This is where you are. This is where you were. This is where you want to be. You want to be closer to the end. Don't mind you. You probably not going to understand this reference that I'm about to make. But this is a little bit more like what you are when you're playing a little game. A little game. My favorite game. You know, back before it was called Activision Blizzard. Yeah, no. No. My favorite game. Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos. Warcraft 3, Frozen Throne. And they borrowed that concept from their own game. StarCraft, Warcraft 2, you know, all the predecessors, all of the things that they had done before, they still maintained a lot of that philosophy, which is most of your screen, the area for your map looks like this. It's dark, right? So let me get rid of that right there. Get rid of that. All right? So, in Warcraft, this is where you are. You are there. Yeah? That's where you are. And you have to explore the rest of the map for the darkness to dissipate. And that brings us back to this. In other words, what nobody tells you about the light side of the force as it pertains to being a content creator is this. You have to push through a lot of this dark for all of your light to shine. You have to. Think of yourself as the little candle. The more you walk into the unknown, is the more of the unknown that is revealed. The more the shadows are. The darkness dissipates. Yeah? So that philosophy has always been true within the development of Warcraft 3. When you're on the map, you're in this corner of the map. I mean, I obviously could have drawn a bigger, map with a square and, I make everything else dark and, but yeah. This will do. Yeah? Similar concept. This is where you are, and this is where you're trying to explore all of this map. And in order to explore all of this map, you have to walk further and further and further out. Right? It rewards you for taking the risk. It rewards you for being adventurous. In other words, cowardice is not rewarded. Not in that video game. And certainly not in life either. Not in life, not in business, not in being a content creator, not in anything. So, suffering more from imagination and reality. Before I did this video, I was not in the best mental condition. You know, look at reality. Your reality is you're not where you want to be. You are surrounded by this darkness. Here's the darkness that you're faced with. I could write them. You have bills that you're not able to pay. Debts that you actually owe. Dealing with the reality of being unemployed. Facing disrespect for being unemployed. Being rejected after interview after interview after interview after interviewing process. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And after all of those stages of those interviews, still rejected, still redirected. Yeah. Pretty much little to no opportunity in the form of being rejected, leading to your unemployment, and so on and so on. This is that darkness that you have to overcome in order for all of this sieve to go away, to become, to step out of the darkness into the light. Imagine you walking with your, whether it could be a torch, it could be a candle, whatever it is, right? Your candlelight or your torch. The more you walk out, the more the darkness disappears. And it happens like that in the video game as well. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the aim of the game. You have to push past all of that darkness to get to this stage of the game. Right? You have to. It's never going to be ideal. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be great. Yeah? You're going to be faced with a lot of resistance no matter what. You're going to be faced with people who claim to be family but they're more like relatives. You're going to be faced with that. You're going to be faced with abandonment and neglect. You're going to be faced with that. You're going to be faced with people doing the bare minimum because they can't bother. You're going to be faced with that. But then when you lead by example and you step out of that darkness into your light, this is what, so the untold aspect and the untold truth of being a content creator is that that's the darkness you have to overcome. There's a lot more darkness than there is light. And you have to fight. This is you. You have to walk all the way out here to push that darkness away to nothing. And it is not easy. Yeah, discipline that mind. But it's not that simple. That is why you have to take action. That is why you have to say, well, stick to the plan, not the mood. Forget about how you feel. It's not, I'll do it when I feel better. I'll feel better when I do it. And I feel better now that I've done this. Because now I can watch this video back. I can share it to you on LinkedIn, on WYFIT, WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I can share this to you everywhere. Reels, stories, everywhere. So that everybody can say, hey, look. Like, what did you think about this? Giving you the full version of it on TikTok, the full version of it on YouTube. And then on TikTok, you can press the full screen so that it goes from this to that, or, whatever. So, I guess the moral of the story is, this is the light and the dark side of being a content creator. And that was today's episode of SUP with B.R.O, otherwise known as Slightly Unprofessional Presentation with Bossman Rambling On. So, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I don't know. But as I said, you'll feel better when you do it. And I just did. So, I'm leading by example. Die when you die.